Thank you for joining our Lunch and Learn presented by Team Up Counseling. Today we have Valerie and Rosemary, and they will be doing a presentation on what Team Up is. If you'd like, you guys could introduce yourselves.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Valerie Rawls, and I'm the clinical director for Team Up Counseling.
Hello, I'm Rosemary Valera, and I am the training and clinical support manager at Team Up Counseling.
Thank you, Valerie and Rosemary, for joining us. So what is Team Up?
So Team Up Counseling, first of all, we are celebrating our 10th year this year. So we're excited about that. That's a big accomplishment for us. We started off just to be a clinical provider, and over the last decade, so many things have changed. So I always say we're a small company, but we have a big footprint. So we work exclusively with young people who are diagnosed with intellectual disabilities. And we have 3 different tiers of services that we offer. So we have our clinical services, which are typically in-home, and we are focusing on communication, behaviors, parent training. And then we have our supportive services, which are aimed at teaching life skills to young people who have intellectual disabilities, because that's so important. And then our third is what are considered to be respite or relief services. And those are designed to give parents of children with disabilities a much needed break. So at our Functional Learning Center, we have programs Monday through Saturday where kids are dropped off. They can give the parents time to either do something for themselves, go get your hair done, go out to eat, connect with your spouse or significant other, or maybe a friend or another sibling within the home. So our goal is to have kids work with us and be able to stay with us the whole way through. They might have to move through different programming, but we can learn to know who they are and give them the services they need that are exclusively for them.
That's amazing. And what is the process to get involved with Team Up?
And one of the main things that can happen, the children who are connected with us are typically coming from referrals through CMO. So through Perform Care and CMO, they can get connected to us for those clinical and supportive services to happen in home. And those could be IIH, IIC, or ISS. Like Valerie mentioned, to work on either behavioral or emotional needs, as well as activities of daily needs. And we also have other services that are community-based that don't require to be connected with CMO. Those are the services that are connected to the family support services like respite. So you can contact Perform Care directly and be connected with the services that are more community-based. Right now, we're also trying to implement other services that are supportive within the community, but those are mainly also either flex funded, and we're trying to see if we can find other areas that families can benefit as well, either through a sliding scale through payment or self-pay.
Thank you. So you would say the process to get involved with Team Up is going through Perform Care or respite services?
The majority of our families who work with us are through Perform Care, but we have a big portion of our families who are fully community-based. So we're in Cliffside Park, so we're not in your area. So a lot of the services we're talking about might be a little harder for you to participate in. But one of the things that we do always try to have in our minds is, especially in this post-pandemic world, what are the gaps that you guys have? And then we can try to figure out ways to incorporate your families to participate. Because we have an ongoing virtual weekly support group for parents of children with disabilities. That's free. And that's families from all over that are just participating to connect with each other. We also have been awarded several different grants from the Department of Health and Human Services and community resource funds, where we've been able to offer different parent training groups. So that might be something that, although we can't physically be in your area, parents could participate virtually if they wanted to. And we do have a pending grant, which would allow us to incorporate some transportation. So hopefully that might be an area where if there's families that want to participate but are a little farther away, like in your situation, we might be able to support in those areas.
That would be great.
And even with our after school and weekend programming, we have families who come from quite a distance to be able to have 6 hours to go do something. So there's things that we can do, but we always are trying to be collaborative with anyone we work with. And we do work in Morrison, Sussex County. We have a smaller team that works there, and we do offer the clinical services. We also offer the supportive services that we discussed and the respite services. Not in the same large amounts that we do in, we're primarily based in Bergen, And so we work heavily in Bergen and Hudson counties, but we have historically worked much more busily within Morrison, Sussex County. Just, I think we're in a rebuilding phase right now. So we kind of look at this year as rebuilding a team, rebuilding our services, and trying to be more creative with community based because the families need that. And a lot has changed in the last few years. So those who do have in-home services, they would have a clinician working with the child as well as the parents. And one of the cool things about like the intensive in-home through disability services is we can also incorporate the siblings, which many times that is our best advocate for being able to have the child practice skills and things like that. These services are free if they're enrolled in Perform Care. The support group is free. We also have our respite programs. They're totally free as long as they're enrolled with family support services through Perform Care. So there's a lot of ways families can participate for free. The ones that do have a cost associated, or if we have an occasional workshop or a 6-week training program, and then we create a sliding scale for those.
Okay. Now, you have highlighted a lot of the advantages of taking your services. Do you feel there's anything else that you could let us know about Team Up Counseling?
I feel like also adding to what Valerie was saying, one of the significant things that we can do is that these services are provided in home, the ones that are, and those can benefit not only the child who have like intellectual and developmental disabilities, but also their family as a whole. So it's a way for the whole family to learn skills. That's why we want to target every single step of it. So we talk about the parent training group. So the parents learn how to manage the different areas that they will need to support their children, but also how they can manage themselves, different things that parents go through, like burnout or managing their own stress and anxiety as well. And so we try to make sure that everyone who's connected with this child is able to learn different skills to then help this child to grow and develop, not only now, but also for the future. That's why like siblings, family members, anyone who's involved can also benefit from those services as well. And in home, it's like we said, it's a small team, but we have many other services, including like camp, for example, that I know is something that children sometimes come, and parents are able to do that if they know it's like a short term, and they can also socialize with other children who might have similar like different level of functioning and being able to interact with and learn social skills and different activities as well. So I feel this is something that not only benefits the children themselves, but everyone who's around them too.
Oh, absolutely. It's really good stuff, especially including the siblings, because that's big.
It's needed.
Yes.
And the ones that know their sibling the best. They know, even if the child is nonverbal, they know exactly what this child is saying, what he wants, if he's hungry, if he's tired, and they get overlooked a lot. But when we can incorporate them in sessions, there's just something magical that happens by having their sibling involved, because they practice even outside of session. So it's pretty cool to see.
Is there any success stories you would like to share?
I mean, there's a lot of success stories. Like we're always proud of families when they graduate with us. I think the thing that outside of a family acknowledgement, I feel like our team has been a team that we're always proud of ourselves, because the last couple of years have been extremely hard, as it has been for everyone. And the fact that we've been able to maintain this time, and this population it was very hard to work remotely and virtually with them. And the amount of effort put into developing like aided communication, visual schedules, we found sites where we can develop different tools that parents can use in home. And we're going to also highlight some of that in the little workshop that we're going to do to show ways that parents can create their own tools at home. I think by learning those pieces, it helped us to be able to be available, even if we have to do virtual work, which that was something that at first we didn't think we could. So I always look at that as one of the areas where I'm like, we did that. That was great, because by being able to develop those skills, the families didn't have those gaps the way they may have been if we didn't learn those pieces.
All right, so then I put the contact information. I don't know if you want to look in the chat to see if it's correct, if there's anything you feel that needs to be added. I added the website, the phone number, address, fax. And then I can share. Okay.
Do you want to add an
And
email?
this would-
Should we add the email?
Yeah, if I could do that.
They can email admin@teamupcounseling.com. Do you want me to type it in there?
Yeah, if you want to do that, that's fine. And then I don't know if you have any final thoughts before you share your presentation, or if you want to share the presentation that you guys have,
What do you think, Rosemary?
and then we can.
I feel like you can go into the presentation so you guys can see a little bit more of what some of the things that we teach and how some of the things that we can incorporate with parents remotely as well. And then based on that, then we can do some final thoughts and then just our closing statements for our presentation today.
Sounds good.
So I'm going to start sharing my screen.
Okay.
Let me know if you guys can see it.
Yes.
All right, so with everything that we do, we always go back to our mission because it keeps us grounded in the work that we do. So our mission is that we believe that every individual seeks to become independent, has the ability to master new skills, and was designed to fulfill a purpose. We're committed to creating an environment that values and promotes personal and professional growth. The only thing that we ask is that those who connect with us have a desire to enhance the lives of young people living with developmental disabilities. And that should be seen in all the work that we're doing. So many times if a provider says, I'm having a hard time with this family or making progress with this child, when we go back to the mission, I often find maybe we're missing some of the steps, such as, are we believing that this child can be independent? Are we believing that he has the ability to develop a new skill? And does he have a purpose within his home that he's consistently doing? So as we're looking at those areas, we want to make sure we're always incorporating the mission. So we always start with that because it helps us to keep our mindset for what we're focusing on.
And keeping that in mind, the way that we work, and this is our mission to every time that we connect with someone, this is what we always have in mind. So based on that, we want to then start and going into our presentation. So everything that we talk about always refer to how we always feel that everyone seeks to become independent and everyone has a purpose. Our presentation today will be about creating routines and visual schedules and how this can be a great aid for parents of children who have IDD. Starting today, we're going to start with communication. And this is something that we're doing right now. So communication is the way that we send a message to each other. And it's something that we typically learn since infancy. So the way that we communicate is something that sometimes when we say communication, we always think about just like either talking, sending a text message, I don't know, sending an email, making a face. But sometimes a lot of that nonverbal cue is something that we tend to forget. So just to keep that in mind is that communication can be verbal, which is using our words to express some thoughts of feelings or sounds. So, but there's also that other big piece that tends to be a little bit more significant in the population that we actually work with, which is the nonverbal piece. Is when we use our body language to communicate something, where you use a whole body to convey a message. When sometimes it's mirroring, is when someone tends to imitate someone else when they do an action. For example, if I start yawning right now, I'm pretty sure some of us are going to yawn together. So like things like that. Or if I'm walking in the street and like I smile at you, typically someone would kind of reciprocate that smile as well. Or if I wave, typically someone else will wave back. And that's kind of how our brain processes some information and communication that way too. And there's also facial expressions. There are some people, probably like me too, that our faces sometimes tells more than what words will say. So like depending on what face I made, that's something that can be a good way to communicate, maybe how I'm feeling or if I approve or disapprove something. Also eye contact. So how sometimes we can use our eyes to convey a message. I think all of us have that experience either with a friend, like that we just look at someone and then you know like exactly what they're thinking. Or even with our parents, like maybe our parents look at us in a particular way and you're like, okay, I know that I need to stop right now. And those are different ways that we use every single time that we're talking non-verbally. And sometimes we completely forget that those exist, or we just take them for granted because we're not actually acknowledging them as much as we do with just verbal communication. However, for our kids, sometimes the non-verbal is a greater form of communication than just using words like we're doing right during this moment.
So I wanted to break like the communication into what's called verbal prompting. So if you work with this population before, you probably are familiar with some parts of verbal prompting, but we're going to highlight just a few of them just to kind of get a sense of what they might look like or feel like. So The first type would be like giving an open-ended or multiple choice type of a verbal prompt. So an open-ended might be like, what would you like to do today? And the hopes will be the child can communicate back to you. But sometimes we have to create parameters or choices for that child to respond. So we might give multiple choices, but they're all within a realm of his choice. So we might say, would you like a cracker, cheese, or cookie? Now I know if we're thinking about like what Caitlin's gonna have, she's gonna have cheese, but and I'm gonna have cracker. But we always want to give choices so that way they can have we're prompting them to pick one. And if I were doing that, I might also physically point at each item as I'm verbally prompting them through that. Another type would be single word prompting. This is usually my favorite one to start with. If I'm not sure about the functioning level of a child or his verbal capabilities, I'm going to start with single words only and grow from there. And the reason is I don't want to kind of clutter his thinking with a whole bunch of words. So we are always trying to work on taking every sentence and reducing it to one word. So that might be jump, fast, break. I might say come. If I want them to sit next to me, and I might tap at the same time on my seat, sit, hands down. So the goal is to try to reduce your language to just one word if you're going to do a single word prompt. And then we have like a full verbal prompt. So this is where we're going to be prompting the child to complete our sentence with a specific response. So for example, the parent asks the child, what comes after Thursday? The parent might prompt the child by stating Friday, and that's indicating to the child to repeat the word. This would be for a child that may need to be prompted on the answers, but wants to feel the success of understanding what you ask them to do. And my son is 13 and I still use these prompts with him. He'll say, what's today? And I'll say, well, yesterday was Wednesday. What is today? And he's a neurotypical teenager. And I still use full verbal prompting with him. And then we have the partial verbal, or you'll use like a piece of the sound. So instead of saying what day is today or what comes after Thursday, we might say fra, and it gives them a piece of the sound for them to be able to finish the word by saying Friday. That was like a 10-week course in one slide, but yeah. It's just thinking about being able to verbally prompt is giving cues to a person within the functional understanding of language that they might have.
And right alongside that, it comes what we call word mapping. And it's when we assign a concrete meaning to a word. And if we think about what a map is, it's something that gives us direction. So when we use word mapping, it's a way that we clearly state the meaning of something to give us direction to what it actually is. And the main thing to think about this, because it's something that we sometimes take for granted, when we are using a word mapping, just using one word, for example, if we say juice, or we just grab a cup and I put it near to a child and we say juice, at the end of that interaction, sometimes the child doesn't know if juice means, is this a cup? Is this a liquid inside the cup? Is this the action of mom putting the cup next to me juice? So when we use word mapping, we actually give a concrete meaning to what the word is. And just might be something more genetic, but I know if we use word mapping for certain skills that we want the child to learn, when we explain specifically what that word means, then it's clearer for that child to understand what is asked of them or what do they need to do to either request that type of item or to follow that type of prompt. Also, it's something that we need to be consistent when using that, because it's a way to just reframe how we communicate to a particular child. I know a good example that Valerie likes to mention a lot is how there was a child that she worked with who hated the word school. And then every time school was mentioned, this child would just get very agitated and escalated the situation very quickly. But when they switched to a different word mapping that they call it learning center, that's when you call it learning center, it's the same place as school. But if you say, oh, how was the learning center, that he was able to interact with you. But if you say, how was school, then that will be an immediate trigger for this child. And given though the place where he goes to school never changed, by changing the word that uses the description of that place, then we associate new meaning and new emotions attached to this new word. And that's what word mapping, especially, I think in general for all of us, but also with this population is very important. It's a great skill but also just help that child to know the road of what that word actually means. And it sounds like it's a lot of explanation for something very simple, but it's kind of like, how can we assign a concrete meaning to something that is going to be used on a daily basis for this child, and that's going to have new meaning and can have new emotions attached to it as well.
And just to add to that, what I love about word mapping is we have the ability to reassign what that child's feeling is, which ultimately is going to start potentially changing his behavior. So if he's afraid, like this particular child that Rosemary was talking about, we didn't know why he was so afraid of school, but when he would get there, he would, as soon as he got off the bus, would have to be restrained. He always had an issue, and it was always very intense. And he had a lot of anxiety regarding going to school. But by changing it, he didn't have an experience of what Learning Center was. So his behaviors approaching the Learning Center were very different. But I can recall one time I forgot that we created a map, and I said to him, "How was school?" And he instantly started trying to hit me and like kind of charged at me because he thought maybe I was going to take him to school. He didn't know what was going to happen. That was my fault because I mapped that and I messed it up. But what I learned from that is mapping is so important because we were able to create a safe enough space with Learning Center that he was able to create emotions and behaviors attached to a positive experience versus school where it's triggering something within him. So another type of communication would be aided communication. And this would be for really anyone. This is in common day everywhere we look. We have aided communication. It's so important in general. With this population, it's really the key to being able to communicate. Whatever we're doing, whether it's verbal prompting, talk discussions, I always want to have a form of aided communication that matches what I'm doing with him. So types of it would be like a visual. A visual would be like something like this. You're looking at a PowerPoint presentation, you're seeing a slide, and you can see on the tree, there's a bunch of different things that are on the branches. Those are visual indicators of what it is that we want you to pick up. So if we're working with a child that we're giving him communication skills, we might also have him have an auditory communication aid. That might be something like a bell, a whistle, a timer. If you're in an elevator, there's an auditory bell that goes off the moment that you're on your floor. A written or textual type of aided communication would be something like a written schedule. So if you can see behind me on my refrigerator, I have a written chore schedule for my kids that they have to follow every day. A gestural type of an aided communication would be where, like when Rosemary was talking earlier about a wave or giving like a thumbs up or giving a pound if you're saying hello. Maybe a gesture is a hug or putting your hand on their shoulder and moving them. That's moving into physical, where we're physically repositioning this child or putting our hand over theirs to complete a task. So if they're having a hard time occupationally to grip a pencil or a toothbrush, we might put our hands over theirs and do some physical communication or physical aid to help them complete the task. And the last would be like positional. So you would put the item that you want the child to retrieve in the specific position that you want him to obtain. That might be more so if they're doing like floor time activities or being able to explore on their own to be able to explore their environment.
I also, part of what we want to talk about today is how do we create those special schedules. So we know that nonverbal communication is very important, and we know that creating those word mappings is also important to give a meaning to those words. So now, using visual schedules is something that we take different series of pictures and then we just complement like every step of the activity. It's something that we can use in our day-to-day through many activities that we do. It's something like, for example, if we know we already have something in our schedule to do during the day, sometimes breaking down into steps can be helpful. This is often used to help children understand and manage their daily activities. So if they know they're already going to brush your teeth, then if we have step-by-step how you do it, it's much easier than just telling me like, go brush your teeth, and then I don't have any guidance in how to follow that. This also is created with using either pictures, we can use photograph, we can use just reading words. And by having that visual aid with me when I'm doing something, it helps me to not only reduce my anxiety of I don't know what comes next or how do I do every step of the way, but also it helps me to be consistent. So if I know there's 5 steps to brush my teeth, I don't have to worry about what comes next. So am I going to miss a step? Did I do it correctly? Or what do I do next after I got my toothbrush? So a visual schedule is something that it can be very concrete because it's something that we see and it has already the steps that we need to follow. So by having something so concrete with us, just makes the routine to go a lot smoother when the time needs to happen for that particular routine. Oops, so fast.
And so as we're talking about routines, with this population, it's so important because once they get into, I see Marissa's head shaking, but once you get into a routine, it becomes fixed and it becomes part of how they want to continue to do things. So the idea is that we want to create routines and sequences for our kids to where they can follow that consistently and regularly to create whatever routine that we're asking them to do. And by having that routine, it will eventually, the hopes will be that it would decrease like the undesirable behaviors, but also help with their transitions. And I have seen with families at first, when we introduce a new routine, it can create some chaos for a period of time. And sometimes it's really hard to stick with it because it's a change of what this child's expecting or what they're used to going through. But if you stick with that, and you incorporate all the different parts that we were talking about, such as the verbal prompting, the visual schedules, word mapping, you can create routines for your child to be able to follow, which will help to manage the evening schedule.
I just wanted to point out, because I always love this little image, like on the side, like what is something that is a routine that we already know, like it's something that goes a little bit smoother. Like we know it the beginning and we're gonna know an end. That's why routines are helpful to just reduce that anxiety. But sometimes for our kids, when they're trying anything, like the little spiral that just like goes over and over again, when like it starts somewhere, but you don't know when it's ending. Sometimes that happens. So having that routine is something that can be a significant aid for the parents when they're introducing something new as well.
Think about like the biggest routine that our kids are involved in on a daily basis is school. So a lot of times I'll hear parents say, he doesn't demonstrate these behaviors in school, he does it at home. He knows what's to be expected. They know how long they're going to be in which class with which teacher for how long, which, and they know when bathroom time is, they know when hygiene time is. So they learn to anticipate that. And as parents, I mean, we have a desire to give our kids a break. We feel bad for them and we know they're tired, and plus we're tired too. We're working all day. And our kids are always working. This population is always having to work. And so I think there's a desire to give them a break, but that break ends up making it so much harder. So it will pay off, and you will see that the child will anticipate it to where he can start going through his schedule more independently as time goes on. We wanted to show you whether they have a neurotypical child or a child with a disability, parents who live in different households, it's hard to get on the same page. So that just adds another level of being able to create consistency. But it's okay with having a routine at mom's house and a routine at dad's house, as long as they're consistent with the prompting strategies. So early sessions, we should be creating what are the word maps we want to use for specific things. What are the verbal prompting strategies we all want to do, and how are we going to do it so he's getting the same response every time when he's completing a task? That's ideal, but that's really the best way to have the most success. We wanted to show you guys a few examples of visual aids, kind of referencing what we were talking about earlier, how we learned how to create some really cool visual pieces that can be incorporated, whether in person or virtually, and that we teach families how to do that as well, so they can be independent with their ability to create their own aids going forward. So we'll go into the first one.
Can you see this one?
Do you want me to do that, or do you want to do
I got it. So I wanted to first show the different examples of which ones we can use, because a visual aid doesn't have to be the same one for everyone. And that's something that is very important to highlight. Every child and every child's needs are completely different. So we have to make sure that we can have a lot of tools, but we have to make sure that anything that we do is tailored to our particular child, or the individual that we're working on at that moment. So this is something, for example, like the first one is something that have multiple steps, and you have a morning and evening routine. It says like, okay, this is what you need to do and get it ready. Sometimes we use something that is only a couple of things at a time, like a first and then visual, because maybe having too many steps can be overwhelming. So understanding your child needs and how the child respond to it is very important, because then that can aid that portion of understanding, like, are they going to respond to a 10th step, or are they going to be overwhelmed after the second? So making sure that we know our child's needs and how do they respond is very important when creating those visual aids.
Right. Can we just go back very quickly to that slide? So I wanted to just highlight just some of the things that we talked about. So the first thing is these two pictures right here, this orange thing and this yellow thing, they're signals of like a visual that represents, we know that this means morning, this means evening. All the pictures are using visual pieces. Then we have the words where the goal is to have them anywhere from like 1 to 2 words. So we have some verbal prompting in there. If you were making this specific for your family, you might choose to map this and give it a whole different phrase. So if your child does not like to get a bath, but they might like to swim in the bathroom, then that might be that you might want to map that differently for your family. And then the next piece is giving them the guide of the routine: first, next, then. So that way all the different pieces are incorporated into that one thing. And if you wanted to step it up even more, you might have some type of an auditory timer that when they complete each one, they get some type of a sound associated with completion. That's how you can incorporate all those pieces into that type of a visual aid. I think we have another example.
And before we go to that other example, I also want to show you how do we create that routine? And that might be repetitive, but I just want to make sure we have like that concrete steps of how we go there. So first, like we said, we're going to understand what the steps that we want to like include in that routine. So if we're going to just speak around on topic, we just want to make sure before we even make that visual schedules, we know which ones we want to target. What steps are we going to do? How many steps are we going to do? And then after we do that, then we're going to understand what would be like the start and end of that routine. So if we know like every routine is going to start with a hello, or every brushing routine is going to start with turning on the light or going to the bathroom, like whatever it is that we want to start with that works for you as a family, that should be the most important thing. Doesn't matter what works for the next family, as long as it works for you, it's fine. So after we already know the steps and we know the start and end, then we're going to identify what that word mapping looks like for our family. Like what Valerie was saying, maybe bathroom time or maybe swimming time or something like that. It's not something that might work for you, but maybe if we said shower, or maybe if we said instead of bathroom, we call it the cleaning room or the hygiene room, like whatever you want to call it, it's fine as long as it works for your family. Then after that, we're going to first identify that visual aid. So we can find the pictures, we can find the different cartoons, whatever works for your family. Some children respond better to cartoons, others respond to real life pictures of things in your house. So whatever works for you, you just have to identify, and then we can identify those pictures that we're going to use. After we already have it ready, then we have to make sure we explain the steps to our child. So it's not like, oh, we created visually, go ahead. So we also have to make sure that our kids understand what this is, because this is a new thing that if we haven't used in the past, they're going to be like, okay, cool pictures. What do I do with it? So we have to make sure they know what the steps are and what is the expectation of them with those steps. And then after that, we start implementing them. And then when we do, we have to make sure that we are consistent when we start implementing those in our daily routine. And just to create a sample right here, just looking at the picture, what kind of routine do you think this one is? I think you said it first.
Washing your hands.
Yeah. So just by looking at the pictures, the first thing we need to know what the topic is. So if we want to do like a whole day routine, it's fine. But if we want to do more target routines, then we can do that as well. So we have a topic. We now know that it's washing hands. Then we know the steps. Right now we have 4 steps for this type of routine. Now for each word mapping, and that could be completely different for any one of us. For some of them, it would be like turn on the faucet. I have people who said open the water, or like whatever it is that we want to do. Then we can assign that word mapping for every single step that we have right here. And then after that, then we just have the whole visual that we're going to use as a guide for every step that we do, or every time that we go wash our hands. Maybe we have it in just by the sink. Maybe we have one in the kitchen. Maybe we have one in a place that the child can grab and take with them. So that way they have that support with them throughout their washing routine, or whatever routine we want to implement.
And keep in mind, this type of it's a 4-step routine, but this might take 2 months to complete. So we might spend multiple sessions, and the parents might spend multiple days consecutively just working on, water off. When it comes to step 2 of pumping the soap, teaching how, like we usually say like a 3-pump, like a 3-pump routine, but that might take several weeks to learn what is the right amount of soap to pump into your hand, holding your hand under the stream of soap and pressing at the same time occupationally requires a lot of focus and ability. So there's a lot of practice that goes with that. A 3rd step might take several weeks, just learning how to tolerate moving their hands and creating soap suds, and then being able to like not put it in their mouth or not rinse it off right away. And then the last piece would be tolerating the water and working on being able to just rinse their hands versus spraying the water or drinking the water. So it's a 4-step routine that just managing our expectations. It might take several weeks where we might break each of those routines into a 4-week session. And here's
And these
another
are like more complex.
schedule. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm just saying that these were more complex schedules.
It's a little bit more complex, but it's also, I love a good checklist. So, like I think, some kids prefer to be able to check off what they've completed. So this one, we created it, breaking it from morning to night. And this is just basically the activity, but if they still have to do it and if it's all done. So if I were working with this family, I would either have this laminated and give them some type of like a dry erase marker that they can complete every day and just wipe it off. Or I might have it to where there's like a Velcro sticky dot that they can move the picture, the check mark from to do to all done. But the goal would be that, again, we're using the visual pictures to represent the task. We're using the verbal prompting and mapping to be able to create the right words that match the activity. And so the parent that's mapped this, if they say wake up, they always will say wake up. They're not going to say anything different. Go to bathroom. And then once they complete it, there's a completion, it just gets moved over to the all done category. I like a checklist just because for me, I feel like I'm making progress. And this is a routine this goes a little bit quicker than the 4-step that we just went over for washing hands, because this is done throughout the evening in a timed fashion. So every day the parent is moving the child through the different steps. And this might be where we're using verbal prompting as well as physical prompting to maybe guide that child from step to step.
And just to highlight too, this is something that I made with one of my teenagers. And like all the pictures that were here, for example, that he picked it. And including your child when he's age appropriate to be part of this process is significantly helpful, because if I would have picked the pictures and be like, this is what you're going to do, he wouldn't want to do it. Any teenager wouldn't want people to tell you what to do. But like, because he picked the pictures and some of them he found them like hilarious. So like every day he's like, oh my God, Miss Valera, I did this. And I was like, oh my God, excited. So making them part of their routine is also very helpful, and they can help to like create those verbal prompting when it is age appropriate as well.
Exactly. And this is where you can also use just one more thing. I'm sorry. Like we talked about using like the partial prompt of it. So if we say what's next and they don't remember, I might say brush teeth, and let them finish it for me. So there's lots of different ways you can incorporate a schedule like this into practicing all the things we talked about.
And just some tips to just kind of like a closing thing about everything we did. I'm sorry that it was a lot of info in a short amount of time, because typically we do this process in like a few weeks program. But just to remember, first of all, be patient. When creating new routines, it takes time to adjust. It takes time to implement them. It takes time to understand every step. So don't get discouraged if you feel like, oh my God, this is taking forever and the child only knows the first step. What should I do next? Should I give up? So just make sure that we have to be patient when we're teaching a new routine. Also be flexible. Sometimes there are things that are unexpected and we need to adjust like on our feet. We have to make sure we cook, we think, we adjust things. Sometimes even making those schedules adjustable, like we can make the pictures to be moving around sometimes, because maybe today we have to go to the bathroom before we do something else. So then that's okay too. So make sure that we can be flexible and adjust it. Everything that we create, nothing has to be concrete forever. Everything that we do is something that is living and is constantly changing. Our children are changing every day. So everything that we do with them should change too, or at least adjust to what those changes are. And be consistent. If we're not consistent, this wouldn't work. I'm telling you from the get-go, consistency is crucial in order to make sure we maintain and create those new routines and make them part of our norm. But if we're not consistent, then there won't be a significant enough change or a significant. And last one, and most importantly, don't give up. I know there are days that are harder than others, and that's okay. Not giving up is what's going to take us to that goal, to eventually your child will be doing this without you helping them, and then eventually get that break. So putting in the hard work is going to be very, very important to then eventually get all those fruits of your labor, even though it might take a lot of time. But you'll get there. And just a last thing, just make sure that Julie wanted to share with you our contact information. And I made sure that we also put it in the chat so you guys have it in case you need to reach out to us for anything. We're more than happy to help you and support you in any way we can. And now I can open the floor for questions.
Well, thank you again for presenting at our Family Partners Lunch and Learn. That was really, really good stuff. Honestly, it was encouraging.